All right, welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive.
Absolutely. Always excited to explore these fascinating texts.
And today we've got something pretty special lined up. Chapter 16 of the Quran.
Often called the bee, right?
Yep, the bee. I think even the title alone sparks some curiosity.
It definitely does. There's a lot to unpack in this one.
And it's a chapter that really gets you thinking about, well, Allah's power.
The way he's woven into every aspect of creation.
Exactly. And that contrast between those who believe and those who don't always makes you think.
Yeah, it almost lays out these different paths and where they lead.
Kind of like a roadmap,
Basically.
So even if you've read this chapter before, I think there are always fresh insights to discover.
I agree. Every time I come back to it, I find something new.
Okay, so let's just dive right in. Starting with those opening verses, they really set the stage, don't they?
Definitely. You immediately get that sense of Allah as the ultimate creator.
Right, shaping everything from the universe to the smallest details.
Humans, animals, the natural world, it's all there.
And it's not just about creating, it's about how these creations serve us.
That's crucial. The functionality is so beautifully intertwined with the beauty.
I love that detail about livestock, the warmth we get from them, the beauty we find in them.
It's such a specific example. And then, of course, the more practical aspects, food, transportation.
All those everyday necessities.
It really hammers home this idea of provision, this divine providence.
Like Allah's blessings are literally all around us.
Woven into every single aspect of our lives.
Yeah, and I think verse 18 really drives that point home.
Oh yeah, that one's powerful, that challenge to even try to count all of Allah's favors.
Right. It's almost like saying, good luck with that, you'll never be able to.
Because there are just so many. It really gets you thinking about being grateful.
Oh yeah, big time. For those everyday things we often take for granted.
That's it, the simple things, the air we breathe, the food we eat.
The relationships in our lives.
Sometimes we need that reminder to appreciate it all.
Totally. It's easy to get caught up in the routine and forget,
Yeah, to lose sight of the big picture.
Now, the chapter also talks about these signs of Allah's power that are all around us.
But there's a caveat, right? They're only for those who truly reflect.
Right. It's not just about passively observing. It's about actively engaging with creation.
And using that reflection to deepen our understanding of Allah.
What were some of the verses that really stood out to you in that section?
Well, the imagery is just incredible, isn't it? I mean, the sun, the moon, the stars.
And all these diverse colors on Earth.
It's like this cosmic tapestry
Yeah.
pointing to the order and grandeur of Allah's creation.
It's like this perfectly designed system.
That's it. And it's functional, too, not just beautiful.
I love how it connects back to the earlier idea of provision, right?
Those creations aren't just aesthetically pleasing, they serve a purpose.
The mountains preventing the Earth from shifting.
The rivers guiding our paths, the stars helping us navigate.
It's amazing when you really think about it.
It suggests that everything has a place in Allah's grand design.
Right. Nothing is random or without purpose.
And speaking of design, let's talk about the bee. I mean, come on, that's a fascinating section.
Yeah, verse 68, it totally jumped out at me.
The idea that Allah inspires the bee to build its hives in specific locations.
That's amazing.
It's not just random. There's divine guidance at play.
And the result?
Honey with all its healing properties.
So much wisdom packed into that one example.
And that's where it gets really interesting. It's not just about bees and honey.
It's a metaphor for us, right?
Exactly. If we strive to follow Allah's guidance with that same dedication and focus,
we can achieve great things.
we can create something beneficial and valuable.
So powerful.
It speaks to the potential within each of us,
To really tap into that divine wisdom and create something amazing.
When we align ourselves with Allah's will, that's where the magic happens.
It's such a beautiful analogy.
It really is, and it sets the stage for those verses that address those who choose a different path.
Right. The chapter doesn't shy away from the consequences of denial.
There's a contrast, a clear distinction between belief and disbelief.
There are those verses that talk about attributing falsehoods to Allah, worshiping idols.
It's serious stuff, and there are warnings about the potential consequences.
It's almost like a wake-up call.
It is. It's like, hey, pay attention. This is important. These choices matter.
And it talks about the concept of the heart becoming sealed, unable to recognize the truth.
That's a powerful image, isn't it? This hardening of the heart.
It's almost like it's covered with layers of something that prevents it from connecting with Allah's light.
Like a window covered in grime, the light just can't get through.
That's a sobering thought.
It is, and it highlights the potential consequences of choosing disbelief.
But even with those warnings, the chapter doesn't leave us in a place of despair, does it?
No, not at all. There's always that reminder of Allah's mercy.
That potential for redemption.
It's a balance, justice, and mercy intertwined.
So there are consequences, but there's also always that opportunity to turn back to Allah.
To repent, to seek His forgiveness.
And it's explicitly mentioned that Allah offers forgiveness to those who genuinely repent.
And make a sincere effort to change their ways.
It's never too late to turn back to the right path.
Exactly, and the chapter provides us with a beautiful example, the story of Abraham.
A shining example of monotheism.
An unwavering devotion to Allah.
He faced his own challenges, right?
He did, but he remained steadfast in his faith, even when surrounded by those who believed differently.
He's such a powerful role model for all of us.
And the chapter encourages us to follow his lead.
To call others to Allah's path, but with wisdom and good advice.
Not forcing our beliefs on anyone, but inviting them to understand.
Yeah, engaging in respectful discussions, that's key.
And that ties in nicely with the emphasis on justice and patience.
Especially when facing trials or persecution.
Absolutely. It reminds us that this life is temporary.
The hereafter is what truly matters.
And in those difficult moments, we need to remember that Allah is with us.
To trust in His plan, even when things feel unfair or challenging.
And there's that beautiful verse, verse 96.
Oh, that one's powerful.
What you have runs out, but what is with Allah remains.
It's like a soothing balm for the soul.
A reminder to focus on the eternal.
Because our possessions, our achievements, they all fade away.
But our good deeds, our connection with Allah, those endure.
That's what truly matters.
It is, and it's something we need to keep reminding ourselves of.
Now, there's one other aspect of chapter 16 that I found really fascinating, and I want our listeners to think about it as we move into the next part of our deep dive.
Oh, retreat.
It mentions Allah giving humans mates and children.
Right, that's a key part of creation.
But how does that connect to those ideas of provision and following the right path?
Interesting question.
How does it relate to both this life and the hereafter?
We'll definitely have to unpack that.
We'll explore those questions in just a bit, so keep those thoughts brewing.
I'm already thinking about it.
Great. Can't wait to dive deeper into that next time.
Me neither.
All right. Until then, everyone, keep exploring, keep reflecting, and keep diving deep.
Peace be upon you all. So, picking up where we left off, that whole idea of mates and children as provisions from Allah.
Yeah, it adds another layer to the conversation, doesn't it?
It does. It's not just about the physical world, the resources.
It's those deep human connections that give life so much meaning.
The relationships that shape us, challenge us, make us who we are.
And it's not without responsibility, right?
Oh, definitely not. Raising children in a way that honors Allah.
Building a family based on those values, that's part of following the right path, isn't it?
It is, and it's not always easy, especially in a world that doesn't always share those values.
Right, and chapter 16 definitely doesn't shy away from that tension, does it?
No, it highlights those who choose a different path, the path of disbelief.
And there's this contrast, this stark difference between belief and denial.
It makes you think about free will. You know, Allah gives us choices.
But there are consequences to those choices.
That's the thing. If you look at those verses, like 20 through 23,
it talks about those who worship idols, deny the hereafter.
Their hearts are described as being filled with denial, even arrogance.
And it's not just about what they say outwardly, it's their inner thoughts and intentions.
Allah knows what we conceal and reveal. Nothing is hidden from Him.
There's that verse 9, that always gets me.
Oh, the one about Allah showing us the paths, but acknowledging that some are flawed.
Right, He could have guided everyone perfectly.
But there's that element of choice. That's what makes us human.
It's like we're being tested, presented with truth, and having to decide what to do with it.
Will we embrace it, or allow our desires and doubts to lead us astray?
And the consequences of those choices, they're pretty clear in this chapter.
There are those verses that talk about those who scheme and plot against believers.
Feeling secure in their worldly power, but, there's that warning.
Punishment can come swiftly and unexpectedly.
It makes you think about the bigger picture.
That our actions have consequences. We can't outsmart Allah.
But it's not all doom and gloom, is it? There's also this incredible hope.
Oh, absolutely. The rewards for those who persevere in their faith, especially through hardship.
Verse 41 specifically mentions those who emigrate for the sake of Allah.
After facing persecution, they find peace and prosperity.
Not just in this life, but even greater rewards in hereafter.
It's a powerful reminder that even in our darkest moments, Allah is with us.
It's a message of hope for anyone facing difficulties, no matter what they are.
And that perseverance, it ties into another beautiful verse, verse 97.
Oh, yeah, about those who work righteousness, male or female, being granted a good life.
and rewarded accordingly. It's such a powerful statement of equality.
And a reminder that our actions matter. Our efforts to do good, they have an impact.
They do. And we're not left to figure it all out on our own, are we?
That's one thing that struck me, this constant reassurance that we have guidance.
Verse 43, right? The reminder that prophets were sent before Muhammad.
Peace be upon him, all inspired by Allah.
It emphasizes that guidance has always been available.
And if we're ever unsure, we can seek knowledge from those who have it.
It's like this beautiful chain of wisdom passed down through generations.
It's comforting knowing we're not alone in this journey.
We have resources, people we can turn to for support.
And that connects back to raising children, doesn't it?
It does. It's our responsibility to teach them about their faith, to give them the tools they need.
To navigate the challenges of life, to make those right choices.
And that guidance, it's not just abstract concepts, is it?
No, chapter 16 gets pretty specific, like with those dietary laws.
Oh yeah, what we consume, what we put into our bodies.
What stood out to you in those verses?
Well, the emphasis on lawful and wholesome foods, verses 114 and 115.
Avoiding things like carrion, blood, pork.
But there's also this acknowledgement that sometimes, situations are complex.
Right, we don't always have control over every circumstance.
So it's about understanding the spirit of the law, seeking guidance when we're unsure.
So it's not about blind adherence, it's about striving to live righteously.
Seeking forgiveness when we fall short, always trying to improve ourselves.
So how does this all tie back into that question we posed earlier?
About mates and children being provisions from Allah.
Yeah, how does that fit into this whole picture of guidance and living a righteous life?
Well, I think it circles back to that idea of striving to live in accordance with Allah's will.
Building a family based on Islamic values, putting those values into practice every single day.
It's not just about what we eat, it's how we treat each other.
Our spouses, our children, the people in our communities.
It's about building a life that reflects the values we hold dear.
And those choices, they have a ripple effect, don't they?
They do. They shape not just our own lives, but the lives of future generations.
It's a legacy we're creating.
Now, there's this one part that I found kind of interesting. It mentions the Sabbath.
The Sabbath? I don't remember that. What verse was that?
Let me see. I think it's... yes, verse 124.
Okay, and what was the context?
It talks about it being decreed for those who differed about it.
So like acknowledging the Jewish observance of the Sabbath.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because it highlights this diversity of beliefs.
Even within the broader Abrahamic tradition.
Right, but ultimately, it emphasizes that Allah will judge between them.
So acknowledging those differences, but reminding us that we're all accountable to Allah.
That's it. It's about focusing on our own actions, not judging others.
Living righteously according to the guidance we've been given.
Exactly.
And speaking of justice, chapter 16 doesn't just talk about dialogue and understanding.
It acknowledges that sometimes believers face real opposition, even persecution.
It gets real, doesn't it? And it offers guidance for how to handle those situations.
It does. What do you think are some of the key takeaways from those verses?
So we were talking about how chapter 16 acknowledges that reality for believers, sometimes there's opposition, even persecution.
Yeah, it doesn't shy away from that.
Not at all. It dives right in and offers some pretty powerful advice on how to respond.
Verses 126 and 127, right.
Those are the ones. What struck you about them?
Well, the emphasis on responding with patience when faced with retaliation, that's key.
Patience, that's a tough one, especially when you're feeling wronged or attacked.
It is, but the chapter reminds us that true patience comes from Allah.
It's like we're tapping into a deeper source of strength.
Exactly. And it tells us not to grieve over those who oppose us or get caught up in their schemes.
Don't let them steal your peace, basically.
That's a good way to put it.
Easier said than done, though, right? I mean, when you're dealing with real injustice, it's hard not to react.
It is human nature, right? But the chapter brings us back to that core truth,
Which is?
that Allah is with those who are righteous and virtuous.
That knowledge alone can be so powerful.
It can. It's a reminder that we're not alone in those struggles.
Even when it feels like we are.
Even then.
Now, there's that one verse, you mentioned it earlier, it keeps coming back to me.
Verse 96.
That's the one. What you have runs out, but what is with Allah remains.
Such a profound statement.
It's like it really puts things into perspective.
It does. It shifts our focus from the temporary to the eternal.
Our possessions, our status, all that worldly stuff, it fades.
But our good deeds, our relationship with Allah, Those are the things that truly matter.
And they have a lasting impact, not just on us, but on the world around us.
Right. It's like that ripple effect.
Okay, so we've talked about responding to challenges with patience, keeping the bigger picture in mind.
But chapter 16 also gives us some concrete guidance on how to actually live a righteous life.
Those practical steps, right?
Verse 90 beautifully sums it up.
Oh, yeah. What does it say?
Justice, goodness, generosity towards kin.
And it also tells us what to avoid.
Immorality, injustice, transgression.
It's like a moral compass, guiding our interactions with others.
I like that, a moral compass.
Always there to guide us when we're unsure.
And it goes beyond just individual actions, doesn't it?
It speaks to broader societal issues, too.
You're thinking of verse 92, the one about oaths.
Yeah, using them deceptively for personal gain.
It specifically warns against one community exploiting another.
That's a powerful message, especially in today's world.
It is. It reminds us that true prosperity comes from uplifting all members of society.
Not just a select few.
Exactly.
It all ties back to those themes of justice and patience, working towards a more equitable world, trusting that Allah supports those efforts.
It's like that image of the bee again.
Diligently following its path to create something beneficial.
We can do the same. Work within Allah's framework to bring about positive change.
And knowing that we'll be held accountable for those efforts.
Right. Verse 89 talks about the day of judgment.
When witnesses will be raised from every community.
Including Prophet Muhammad himself.
Wow, that's a powerful image of accountability.
Our actions matter. Not just for us, but for the communities we're part of.
The legacy we leave behind.
And that legacy is shaped by how we live each day.
The choices we make, big and small.
The words we speak. The effort we put into following Allah's guidance.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into chapter 16, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away?
I think it's this. Chapter 16, it's not just a collection of verses.
It's a guide.
A guide to living a life of purpose and meaning.
Rooted in belief, action, and trust in Allah's wisdom.
The path to righteousness. It might not always be easy, but it leads to true fulfillment.
In this life and the next.
Exactly.
Beautifully said. And to our listeners, we encourage you to revisit this chapter, reflect on its verses, and see how its messages resonate in your own lives. Notice the signs of Allah's power and provision all around you. Think about how you can embody those values of justice, generosity, and patience in your interactions with others. And ask yourself, how can you contribute to building a world that reflects the beauty and wisdom of Allah's guidance? Keep those questions in mind, and until next time, keep diving deep.
Peace be upon you all.